Welcome everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Welcome to this ILTA webinar on 4th of Feb 2026 around ensuring access to DMS content during unforeseen service outages with netDocShare Sync. My name is Raghav Jagannathan. I've been working with Microsoft technologies since almost 3 decades now. I'm a conference speaker. I speak at many conferences, including ILTA conferences, as well as other legal tech events. I'm also the president and CEO of a couple of legal tech companies, KLSD, a leading software and services company based out of New Jersey, focused on helping law firms perform SharePoint and Microsoft application integration, and Clobout Inc., which is a company I'm representing today, which is focused on primarily 3 key products: netDocShare, IamDocShare, and Clapper. Today I'm representing netDocShare software. That's for integrating NetDocuments content with Microsoft 365. Now, before we get into our hands-on demo and get the conversation flowing here, we just want to open up a couple of poll questions so that we can just get a sense of the audience in terms of what key issues you care about when it comes to ensuring continued access to DMS content during any kind of unforeseen issues around access or outages and so on. So please feel free to answer those 2 questions as the poll opens up in a minute. So while you respond back to those questions that we published right now, let me set up a little bit of context of why we're here. We are a very proud partner of NetDocuments, and we've been working with NetDocuments ever since 2018. We created a software called netDocShare that basically, as the name implies, netDocShare. The idea around netDocShare is to surface NetDocuments content in SharePoint. That's where our journey started in 2018. Around 2019, 2020, we launched an incredible software called netDocShare Sync. And the reason why we started that or launched that is because we had many customers of NetDocuments reach out to us during the peak of COVID who wanted to basically share data, share content within Microsoft Teams for ease of collaboration, within SharePoint Internet for ease of collaboration. So we basically started looking into netDocShare Sync, where netDocShare Sync could be a software that basically lets you collaborate, expose content from NetDocuments into Teams, and help you collaborate right within Microsoft Teams or Microsoft SharePoint or Microsoft OneDrive. And you can perform those updates right within those systems without worrying about when and how those documents will be copied back into NetDocs, where the document should always live, which is because NetDocuments is your source of truth. It's a document management system. It's where your documents live from a compliance, governance, security perspective. So our netDocShare Sync product was designed for the purpose around 6 years ago, and we launched the market with resounding success. We have a lot of customers who use the software for basically performing bi-directional or one-way sync between NetDocuments and SharePoint, Teams, OneDrive, even migrating from file shares, as well as copying content within NetDocs. Now, how is that relevant to this topic that we are talking about today? So obviously, vendors rely on third-party services like Microsoft Azure, Microsoft other services, or even Amazon Web Services, AWS. And because we all vendors rely on these mammoth giants for hosting their platforms, these platforms are obviously very resilient, and most of the times they have a 99% uptime guarantee, but that 1% can result in infrastructural issues. And so far in the last 12 months, we've had a number of different outages, both on the AWS side and Azure side. And the vendors who host their services on these platforms are not shielded from that. So the question then arises is, what happens if your DMS platform that you dearly love and you use every day, what happens when you are unable to access that content, when these kind of infrastructure-related issues happen? And that's where netDocShare Sync has really taken center stage, especially in the last 12 months or so, where on both sides, all the leading DMS vendors, the clients for those DMS vendors have started thinking about a plan B for having access to the continued access to this content if and when these infrastructure issues happen. And that's where, for NetDocuments customers, netDocShare Sync plays a major role here, because netDocShare Sync for the last 6 years, customers have the ability to back up or create sync jobs, both bidirectional one way, that can basically copy content between the two platforms. So God forbid if there are some issues from a cloud infrastructure perspective and those services are down, then rest assured your content repositories in Microsoft 365 or even network shares can be brought back from the cold to a hot kind of state where they can be accessible to your users instantly. So in today's demo, I'm actually going to show you how with netDocShare Sync, you're able to back up or copy content, both bidirectional and one way, from NetDocuments workspaces and or cabinets into a SharePoint site collection based document library. And we're going to see a couple of scenarios where you can back up or copy a bidirectional or one way NetDocuments content into a SharePoint site collection document library, or you can also copy multiple NetDocuments workspaces into multiple document libraries in a SharePoint site collection. Now, obviously, for the purpose of this demo, we are assuming that most of this audience is familiar with what is SharePoint and what is a site collection in SharePoint, a site in SharePoint, and what is a document library in SharePoint. If not, then obviously we'll leave our my contact details behind. So you can always scan that right at the end of this demo, and we can have a private one-on-one meeting. So right now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to quickly switch over to my demo. And in this demo, I'm going to showcase how netDocShare Sync can be used for doing exactly that. So here we are within the netDocShare Sync platform. The beauty about this platform is it can be completely self-hosted by the customer, meaning that we have customers all over the world, from Australia to Asia, through to obviously North America, through to Europe. And we have highly regulated customers who are public sector institutions and so on. So we work with all law firms, general counsels, Fortune 100 companies all over the world. And one of the key things that most organizations care about, if not all of them, is security, compliance, privacy, and especially when it comes to synchronization of content between platform A and platform B, in this case, NetDocs and SharePoint. So when you're thinking about a sync tool, obviously the obvious question to ask is, are you storing this data somewhere? Are you storing it in some temporary storage before you move it or copy it between SharePoint and NetDocs, or Teams and NetDocs, or OneDrive and NetDocs? The answer is no. We do not store any temporary data anywhere. It's simply copying from point A to point B using APIs from NetDocs and APIs in the SharePoint, Teams, and OneDrive side. But to be 100% sure and happy and whatnot, to tick all the boxes from a privacy, confidentiality, security, even local jurisdiction, country laws perspective, our customers can 100% host netDocShare Sync within their tenant, within their Azure tenant, or within simply a Windows Server VM. And this can completely run locally. You don't need, without any footprint whatsoever, to any vendor. In fact, we recommend a locally hosted netDocShare Sync if you're migrating, or if you're copying, if you're syncing terabytes of data. Our customers are syncing several terabytes of data from NetDocuments to SharePoint or OneDrive or Teams. If you have a use case like that, you should host netDocShare Sync locally within your VM, a virtual machine, a virtual server, or on your Azure tenant. So now with netDocShare Sync, we have several sync types, especially for this scenario we're talking about, where we are talking about a scenario where we are simply backing up some content from NetDocuments into SharePoint as a cold backup in case we need to access this content, just in case we are unable to access content from the DMS. In those instances, you might want to use what is called a bi-directional sync. And what a bi-directional sync does is basically lets you edit not only access, edit documents in SharePoint during any kind of cloud services outage. And you can simply not worry about when these documents and how these documents are synchronized back to in this case, NetDocuments. So with the bidirectional sync, I can add documents to the document library. I can edit documents, existing documents in the document library. And I can even co-author documents in the document library without thinking about how and when this document goes back when services are restored. So outside of the syncing content part, you can also control when the sync happens. Very important. How often the sync happens. Whether you copy metadata columns, which means that you have the ability to copy metadata means profile. So you can copy in NetDocuments, you have the concept of profile metadata, where you can copy the metadata out of NetDocuments as well as you copy the documents themselves, so that you have, say, client number, matter number, correspondence type, and all these different metadata columns that are very useful. Author, even date timestamp, like created by, modified by. You can copy all that into the SharePoint document library for ease of use, search, and so on. Apply permissions is very important, where you can also apply permissions on every content that you copy out of NetDocuments, in this case into SharePoint, because you want to make sure that during a scenario where you are making this cold storage online in SharePoint, you want to make sure that people don't access content they're not supposed to. It mirrors the permissions in NetDocs. And last but not the least, date timestamp lets you copy created by, modified by, the system date timestamp, so that you know that who's modifying this content, who modified in NetDocs when you're modifying in SharePoint. The same thing applies in SharePoint. If you update in SharePoint, it'll make sure who has updated this content in SharePoint, so that you can track that in NetDocuments. Obviously, that is there's a key assumption that your users on both sides are on Microsoft Entra or Microsoft Active Directory, Cloud Active Directory. And then the next step is basically for you to go and choose your SharePoint location and your NetDocuments cabinet or the workspace that you want to synchronize with. So we're going to go back and look at a job that I've already created prior to this demo, just to save on time. But let's look at the final product. Let's look at how this would actually look, right? So let's say the sync job is being configured. We'll do a deeper dive into the sync job in a second. But let's say the sync job was configured and we have all these different sync jobs running, and it's basically automatically creating this this data set in SharePoint. Now, during any kind of service outages, if I have a content here, let's say I have a content right here, which is, let's say, Contoso Market, and I want to access that. So I can simply, when my SharePoint comes back online, I can simply find this content by many different facets, because I've also copied the metadata. So at any point, I can simply click on the home page. Let's say and this SharePoint site can be branded to make it look like your firm with its colors and logos and all that stuff. But because it's also copied the metadata, you have the ability to search by metadata columns, right? So you can search by name, you can search by metadata columns. I can simply the word Contoso, you can see that it automatically goes and finds that. Or I can also find by doc ID, right? So for example, there's a specific document here. As you can see, there are many document libraries. These are called document libraries in SharePoint, which are basically mapped to corresponding cabinet folders or workspace folders or workspace content. You can see that it's not only copied the content, it's also copied the metadata, such as doc IDs and so on and so forth. So I should be able to find information by doc IDs as well. So I should be able to simply type in the doc ID and find that information I'm looking for. So now if you're copying additional metadata columns like client, matter, correspondence type, doc type, and so on and so forth, author, then you have the ability to search on those fields as well. So why is this important? This is important because with this solution now, you are no longer relying on IT to give you back access to the document. You're no longer relying on a third party. Attorneys technically could come into this site and could search on and find the documents that they're looking for or working on, and they can simply continue to work on it. For example, here I can simply go into any one of these doc libraries that I have access to in NetDocs workspace. That's now I have same access in SharePoint, and I can simply continue to work in that on that file. For example, here I'm just going to open that in PowerPoint, and I can continue working on this PowerPoint because the document is living within SharePoint. So I can say something like, say, I can make my updates here as fit. And I can simply exit it. I can even in my co-authors this document and work together because the document is now being worked on in SharePoint. So while we work on this document, we can basically be rest assured that as the changes we make in this specific document library, when the services are restored, this document will be automatically picked up by our sync job. So let's go and look at how that works in a second, and we'll open up a short poll right after that. So I'm just going to go and show you the sync job that actually does the magic. So there's a sync job that I already configured. You can see that it's continuously running every 30 seconds. And basically, it's the sync job's job is to monitor updates, changes, additions that's happening in that document library, and to seamlessly move it, copy it back to NetDocuments when services are restored. So in this way, your work can continue. So you're basically continuing to do your job, being productive. Your attorneys can find information that they need. They can continue to kind of work within SharePoint, and they can seamlessly transition to NetDocuments once any kind of unforeseen outages are over. So you don't have to rely on a third party like a IT or any other administrative function to basically get access to key firm documents. And that's the key takeaway. So what we're going to do here is we're going to open up a quick poll that would help us understand so far what you've heard so far and what kind of key benefits and challenges you see based on what you've heard. All right, so please respond to that poll while we continue to show you some other cool features. A couple of other things to discuss here, which is as you think about a sync process where you are setting up these sync jobs, obviously most law firms have hundreds, if not thousands, of workspaces. And the question that often comes up during these demos are, this is great, but it's not really scalable because we have hundreds and thousands of workspaces. We have gigabytes, if not terabytes of data in NetDocuments. And copying all that content into SharePoint is just doing that all manually step by step is not going to be a viable option for us. We understand that because we've been doing this for 6 years now with netDocShare Sync. So we get that sync jobs cannot be created one by hand. So we have many different options to bulk create these sync jobs. One option is for you to use our netDocShare Sync Power Automate stencil. Power Automate is a workflow builder from Microsoft that is part of the Microsoft Power Platform. With our Power Automate stencil, you have the ability to basically recreate a workflow that would automatically do two things. It would automatically create sync jobs for the workspaces that you deem you want to create sync jobs for. And it also automatically scans a cabinet or a set of cabinets for changes, new workspaces that are created, so that it can automatically create a sync job for those workspaces. So in this way, you have the ability to control or automate the process of creating a sync job and managing a sync job. We also have other options. We have a bulk import option where you can bulk import jobs. You basically create a CSV file and bulk import them. And we also have a .NET based batch job process as well. So regardless of what option you choose, you have the ability to bulk create sync jobs, which is the key takeaway. You don't have to do them one by one. So outside of the common things we talked about in terms of backing up an entire workspace or copying an entire workspace from NetDocuments into SharePoint, the way I showed you before, where I have a workspace and I'll copy the content, a selected content, or all content from that workspace into SharePoint doc library. What about scenarios where I don't want to do that? My workspace might have 10 to 15 gigabytes of data. And scaling that across 1,000 workspace, that's a lot of data. That's almost 15,000 gigabytes, almost, I think, close to 15 terabytes. So we don't want to do that, right? So we don't want to copy anything and everything because we don't want to create a copy of every single file of every single workspace in SharePoint. So we have a solution for that as well. We call it Delta copy. The idea behind Delta copy, or copying only updates that's made in a specific time frame, you can do that with NetDocShare sync. You have the ability to copy what is called a safe search object from NetDocuments, where you can set up a safe search object that only copies content that is modified in the last 60 days. Now, with this approach, you now have the ability to copy content that you only care about the last 60 days. Most people care about the data that they updated in the last 60 days because most outages can last for a few hours, maybe worst case a day or so, but services do get restored. So you don't need access to hundreds and thousands of files typically, right? There might be exceptions for you to continue your work. And most of the times your work would be at least the last 30 days or last 60 days modified files. And as we all know that NetDocuments has a functionality called recent files, where recent files shows you that view. Or you can also create within a workspace safe search that can return all this last 60 days modified files for you. So when you do that, you can use that safe search as a source. So let me show you how that works. So for example, here I have a cabinet and a workspace called Gamma Holdings. And within the workspace, you can see here, I have a safe search. This safe search is designed for returning data from this particular workspace that's modified within a certain time frame and it's of a certain type of document. So I can use that safe search as a source to copy into SharePoint. So with this approach, I have the ability to basically only copy content, in this case, the marketing team virtual folder, which is effectively a safe search in NetDocuments. I can only copy the files within that safe search, not the entire workspace. The only disadvantage to this or limitation to this is the fact the sync type you see is set to NetDocuments to SharePoint. It's not bi-directional. Because by design, at least for today, our NetDocShare sync tool, and based on the limitations out there with the APIs, the NetDocShare sync tool cannot process changes from SharePoint into a safe search. So when you set up a safe search as a source in NetDocuments, and you just want to copy the content within that safe search, it's a one-way traffic, which means that you can make it accessible in SharePoint. You just can't work in SharePoint on those files because you can work on them. They're just not going to go back into NetDocs. So this is a good way for you to kind of expose data from NetDocuments to SharePoint, a limited set of data, a very focused set of data that matches that search criteria, but with the limitation that it's a one-direction sync, not bi-directional. While we're on this concept of copying content from NetDocuments, one more feature that often stands out in these demos, client demos, is our really cool feature that we have that helps you back up personal workspace from NetDocs into OneDrive. Now, why is it relevant? We see a lot of law firms, a lot of attorneys in a law firm extensively used personal workspace, where personal workspace in NetDocs becomes your kind of a go-to place for saving your personal documents. Now, in spite of whether there's an outage or not, OneDrive, Microsoft OneDrive for Business, which is readily available for you within your Microsoft 365 subscription, you have the ability to do a lot of cool things with OneDrive for Business. One of the really cool things that you can do with OneDrive is mobile accessibility. So once you sync your content with OneDrive for Business, you can take this content and access it anywhere you want, offline or online, which makes it incredibly powerful. So you have the ability to access this OneDrive content on a mobile app. You can access the OneDrive content on your PC with the OneDrive for Business app. And you can simply work on these OneDrive files offline if you're flying or in transit without internet. And OneDrive agents just automatically takes care of any updates you do from mobile to PC to Mac to offline to online. It's just magical, incredible. So you can use the power of OneDrive to basically synchronize with netDocShare sync. You can simply do a bi-directional sync of your OneDrive, of your NetDocs content, your personal workspace in NetDocs with the OneDrive. And you can obviously, OneDrive by design is personal, which means that it belongs to an individual, not to a team. So you can basically back up the personal workspace from NetDocs to that attorney's OneDrive, and the attorney can continue to work from wherever, online or offline within OneDrive, and our NetDocShare sync automatically takes care of that synchronization behind the scenes. So this is unlocking a lot, especially helping a lot of law firms give their attorneys the power to kind of basically work on NetDocuments content offline using this OneDrive bridge to NetDocuments that we built with our netDocShare sync tool. So we have 2 minutes left here. So we see a bunch of questions being posted on our chat. So I'm just gonna take these questions quickly. Before I start answering some other questions, I just want to leave you with this thought. We have done a webinar on this in the past, so we'll share this with you guys as a webinar post follow-up. But one of the things that we also ship in our netDocShare suite of our family of products is a product called netDocShare Provisioning. And what netDocShare Provisioning does is basically helps you automatically create teams, channels, sync jobs, which we talked about extensively, SharePoint extranet sites, if you want to collaborate with external customers, automatically done. So when you onboard a matter with provisioning, you can set up a provisioning job that automatically creates these assets in Microsoft Teams and or SharePoint extranet that automatically has sync jobs created that does bi-directional one-way sync from NetDocs, selected files and folders and from workspaces into those respective repositories. And you can manage the life cycle of those assets as well, including deleting the team or deleting the SharePoint site and backing it up into NetDocs, archiving. So I'm just going to leave our contact details here. I'm going to take a couple of questions. I see one question here, which is, can we host this ourselves? Absolutely. So I've answered this before. netDocShare sync can be 100% hosted by a firm within your firewall. You do not need to use our hosted service. We have customers who are migrating terabytes of data, copying terabytes of data between systems, between NetDocs and Teams or netDocShare to migrating from netDocShare to NetDocuments. So you can use our software for a variety of purposes, and you can set 100% self-hosted. We have one more question here on permission. Can netDocShare sync synchronize permission from NetDocs to SharePoint? Yes, absolutely. So permission is something that we sync. I showed you we have an option called apply permissions. For every single folder, every single file that is synchronized from NetDocuments in my demo into SharePoint, or it could be in Teams or OneDrive, or even from file shares, we synchronize permission between the two systems. It's an option that you can enable or disable, because the reason why we give that option is because we have scenarios where you want to copy content from NetDocs and share with customers where you don't want to apply permission. But for internal collaboration, apply permissions should be set to yes, which means that all the permissions will be automatically synchronized. So that's my time, guys. If you want more information on NetDocShare Sync, or you're interested in additional scenarios that is specific to you, please scan this QR code to set up a call with me. We're going to open up a couple of poll questions just to kind of get a feel, and if you can give us feedback about this webinar. We thank you so much for attending this webinar. Thank you.